What's up, folks? Casual Dad here. Just checking. Casual Dad here with our next Warhammer Combat Cards Warlord Guide. There we go. I've been doing a lot of these. You'd think I'd have this down. Next, we're going to touch back on Tau with Commander Shadowsun, coming in at 31 points with decent stats. Actually, one of the more durable warlords at this price point, especially because of her special ability that we'll talk about in a second. She's kind of a twin warlord with Farsight, who I'm also going to do in a little bit because he's at a higher price point, except he's the melee version and she's the ranged version, because their abilities basically mirror each other except for the different attack types and some slight variations in cost and stats. But as you can see, she's very much ranged focused. She does have a melee attack as well, so it's not nothing, but it's not going to do very much. But the combination of her ranged attack stat and then precision shot and Inspiring Presence, even if it only maxes at rank 2, still makes her very much a headhunter warlord. While she pops on the board, doesn't really want to take a hit, because even max her hit points are fairly low, but she does a lot of damage very quickly and in a very bursty way. And then her ability is, when your last card is deployed, your deployed Tau cards heal to full wounds and gain plus 20 ranged attack. So at max, she will be 115 plus whatever she gets from that Inspiring Presence, whatever rank it may be. Now, one of the really key things I want to mention about that ability is that it says your last Tau card is deployed. That does not say it has to be her. So kind of the single most key thing, the most key pro tip I've got for both Shadowsun and Farsight is that you can deploy them first, lose a card, and then deploy your final bodyguard, and that will heal Shadowsun herself up to full health. So you can play a little bit of a gamble, tank a little bit of extra damage, and then charge back up to go ahead and get yourself to the end game. So that's a really important point and something that can really help kind of push your game a little bit further. Now, looking at a deck, of course, you want to do something very ranged focused, fairly aggressive, but you also want a nice mix of very beefy and somewhat fragile cards so that Shadowsun can hit the board and heal up your cards to keep them alive through to the end game. So my two obvious picks, of course, are going to be Longstrike, and then this 30-point battle suit, the Ghost Keel. But really the thing about her is she synergizes well with ranged cards. Her ability only happens when the final card is deployed, so she doesn't really care what else is on the board. You could even do a melee one, but that plus 20 range damage to deployed bodyguards is something that you will want ranged cards to take advantage of. So she does well with target acquired. She, of course, does very well with the taunt drones that are kind of standard to the Tau battlefield, these two right here. But usually she just does well with decently durable shooting cards. So anything from this batch, especially the Riptide mixed in here, either one of the Riptides, is a good call, just because, again, she can heal something up in the end game. So if you have durable cards that can heal up at the end game, that's a nice kind of way to make sure you're getting the most out of her ability. She does benefit from Barrage because of that plus 22 range damage, but you don't necessarily need it just because it's not a key part of her kit. So I'm going to play a couple games here. But yeah, just like long story short, there's really no wrong way to build Shadowsun unless you go all melee. And even then, that's not necessarily wrong. It's just not great. But you really want to put in your highest offensive output ranged cards that also have good hit points. So no matter what cards you have at the end game, you have a good opportunity to take advantage of that heal. So we're going to go ahead and drop this down. She is one of the better starting warlords because her own stats start relatively high, even if they kind of peter out later on in the game. Hey, perfect, a mirror match. Or not a mirror match, but we get to see the other version here. Nice. I'm not actively laddering with Tau, so this should be a relatively easy matchup, but my Tau are not super strong. I say that. Okay, I just got critical mass with Longstrike, where Longstrike is very terrifying, so I'm actually rather scary with Tau, so I shouldn't have said that. We'll put the cheap guy down here. But so you can already kind of see what a Farsight deck does as well. You've got your Riptide. His ability is very similar to Shadowsun's, and we will do a chapter for him later. But you've got an Endless card in there to kind of gum things up. You've got the Durable card that you want to be careful with to make sure you don't lose it too quickly, so that you have the opportunity to heal it up. And this is going to be terrific, because either way this goes, we'll be able to see the end game and where you want to be careful with either Shadowsun or Longstrike. Excuse me, Farsight. Shadowsun or Farsight. That one's Longstrike. That one's Farsight. And I'm just playing extremely aggressively, just removing cards to try to pull Farsight himself as early as... Yeah, Farsight himself as early as possible. Should be relatively easy. Oh, yeah, got him there. And so there already I've denied the biggest piece that would have benefited from that heal, unless he's got the other battlesuit in there. Does not look like. Okay, so it doesn't. Now here's where it gets tricky. So you're looking at this. I'm at the very end game and checking that remaining cards in deck. The last card the AI has there is Farsight. And so the AI will always deploy the Warlord last, so they don't really benefit from the ability as much as a human player does. But the thing here is I want to kill every card on the board. Anything I don't kill does not matter if I hit it or not, because it will heal up to full health immediately. Now I don't really have a choice here, just because of kind of what's against me. That's not totally true. I could have readied, and if I had readied, I would have had a bit of an edge there. I will say that... Okay, I'm going to regret that. We'll do it anyway. I've got the outflank to go ahead and reduce there. Now, the difference between Shadowsun and Farsight, and of course I'll cover that again, is that instead of giving the plus 20 melee damage... Or excuse me, instead of giving the plus 20 range damage to bodyguards like Shadowsun does, Farsight, the red guy, who is now dead, readies, I believe, 5 times with melee. So he's a brawler, headhunter, endgame piece who wants to hit something with melee in the end, which is kind of nice because that balances out a bit with your very heavily ranged-themed decks. Of the two, Shadowsun is cheaper. She starts out slightly better stats, and I'll do one more game here so we can go ahead and see that. Starts out with slightly better stats early on, but I do think that of the two, between Shadowsun and Farsight, Farsight's improved stats, where he's considerably scarier later on, and also his Headhunter-esqueness, where he can really dance in the endgame, makes him a stronger choice of the two. That said, Magnus did nothing wrong. They just changed those tooltips on us. That's funny. Yeah, won't go into that. Anyway, but with Tau, they're both good. And depending on how you play, you could go either way. They're not necessarily dramatically better until they get to very, very high level, at which point I do think Farsight does kind of get a good leg ahead of Shadowsun, but Shadowsun is dramatically cheaper. She's, I think, 10 plus points cheaper than Farsight, so you can squeeze more of a deck in with her if you want to put in more of your power cards. She also, in her endgame, will synergize with your bodyguards, so if there's a moment where you have a barrage card that can finish off a bodyguard and do extra damage to get you lethal on the opposing warlord, you can do that, whereas Farsight, you have to choose between melee or ranged, and hope that you got the right combination of damage that you need to actually finish out the game. Any second now. Yeah, quick and dirty. This is going to be one of the shorter warlord guides because the fairly straightforward, and the key point has already been said. In terms of play during the game, you just want to be a little bit careful with your power pieces and make sure as best as possible that they are there in your end game, so they are the ones that get healed up and their damage buffed by Shadowsun when you deploy her. It's taking quite a bit longer than expected. Yeah, I'm not too concerned about a surrender. We'll try that again. Server could not be reached. All right, let's try again. May end up not being that short of a video after all. We'll see. But anyway, there we go. Okay. All right, I saw the Tau iconography up there. I thought it was going to be another Tau mirror match, but not. Okay. So this is a good matchup too because we have another really good endgame warlord in the Nemesis Zendrek. Because I'll have to get through Vargard Oberon to go ahead and finish out this game. A note on target acquired, especially when you're starting out early on, this is just a general note, you want to play your target acquired cards earlier than later, because if at any point you're in the end game and you have to deploy a card and your last card left alive is target acquired, that can force you to shunt your attack away from the opposing warlord, and instead of getting to the end game, you end up killing a bodyguard, and that basically gives it taunt and keeps the opponent alive and loses you the game. So in the having a taunt in the end, or having a target acquired in the end, is a lot more likely to lose you a game than spending it too soon. So that's just something kind of to keep in mind as a general play tip. Ooh, and this is actually a rather, well, it's kind of low level, but yeah, all right. Here you go, Long Strike. See what you got. Yeah, we should close this out fairly easily. Although I will say I'm pretty low on cards here. I'm probably going to end up pulling the trick, and then we'll see what happens. And by the trick, I mean playing Shadowsun and then playing a bodyguard later. But that is risky, because if you do that, and whatever you're up against doesn't have the oomph to actually kill one of the last bodyguards, so you'll bleed too much health before you actually deploy Shadowsun herself, that can also lose you the game. So it's a risky play, but it is always an option that can be very powerful in certain matchups. All right, let's see here. And Long Strike doesn't have enough damage to punch straight through Seamet's shields, but it's close. Ooh, and Nemeser's ability buff debuffed ranged just in time. So now we'll go ahead and get the Nemeser himself on the board, and then Vargard on the board before Shadowsun, which is great. You might hear my dogs in the background. They seem to have noticed the mailman is outside. We'll see how that goes. And end game. Should take out the... Oh, not quite enough to that... There's the Nemeser really showing off there. That outflank saved his butt. And then, well, saved Seamet's butt, because I would have had the damage to kill him. And then also he's going to do it again, so I'll debuff for the next round as well. But comfortable win on this one. Wow, what happened over here? Okay, underestimated that guy. Yeah, and rage cards, don't hit them piecemeal. Take them all out at once. And then we're going to go ahead and see this heal. I believe everything triggers after the precision shot, so you're not even going to see the heal or the buff, because she'll just do it. And that's something to watch out for, is that if you are forced to deploy that against a card with Death Blow, it can wipe your injured bodyguard before the heal pops off. So watch out for that, be prepared for it. So that's a good tip I wanted to make sure to show in the end there. Cool, I would have missed that. So there you go, 2 games with Shadowsun. She's a cool warlord. Tau is a very strong faction. I'm always a little bit torn on the warlords that don't have a global ability. They don't have something that triggers until they hit the board. But Tau have such a clean play style with such a powerful card pool that it works out for them in ways that it wouldn't in some of the other factions. So that was it. I hope you enjoyed it, and until next time.